Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Sigi, one of the WFA's educators and a body image and mindset coach. Today, I want to introduce Dr. Stacy Baker. For those who don't know Stacy, she is a health and wellness professional with over a decade of experience and is driven by a passion for functional and alternative medicine. And she's crafted this beautiful, unique approach to wellness that blends into functional medicine, naturopathy, holistic health and nutrition, and fitness. And I want you to think of today's podcast as a way to help you roadmap your way to health, treating your mind a little bit better, your body, your spirit, and having everything interconnected together. Stacy, thank you so much for jumping on. You have probably been one of my biggest inspirations this far on taking my approach in a holistic way and understanding the nervous system in a simpler way. And we've just spoken about this before we started recording. And I would love you to share your wisdom with our listeners to make them understand, how does a nervous system work and why is it important for our mind and body connection?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for that beautiful intro. I'm so honored. I'm happy to be here. And I think it's really important to understand how our nervous system works, because if you can't find balance in your nervous system, you can't find balance anywhere else. And because the nervous system is where all of that signaling throughout our whole body starts. So think about the easy way to explain the nervous system is two branches, essentially, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The sympathetic is there for survival. It's there to ramp up some processes and downregulate others that are maybe not vital in a life or death situation, right? And then the parasympathetic is what we bounce back to. We go to this place of homeostasis and healing. And in an ideal situation, we would have an acute stressor, and then we are able to get back into that place of ease, right? That place of ease and parasympathetic. However, we are caught up in this society, in this environment, right, where we are just swinging way too much in that sympathetic season. And we run out of our reserves to get our bodies into parasympathetic. We start to have biochemical things that are affecting things like blood sugar and sleep and hormones and all of those things that get depleted when we are chronically stressed, and we can't swing back over into that para state. And so that's when we start to get symptoms, right? We get to that place of dis-ease in the body. So understanding the nervous system component is knowing that all the signaling starts there, and you have to start the balancing act there as well.
I love how you mentioned about balancing, because it's most likely like a pendulum. Like too often we'll go into one way, which is more of that negative, the fight or flight system, and us to regulate it, we need to go into the parasympathetic nervous system. However, as you mentioned, too often we revert back to more of the fight or flight, the stress and so forth. And finding that balance is quite crucial for people. And you mentioned around the blood sugar balancing and hormones. How does that affect a body if it's out of balance?
Yeah, so that's when we start to have, like, let's just say if our body is stuck in survival, which there are studies that show over 70% of us are stuck in that survival mode. We are going to have issues with our hormones, right? Because our body's preferring to make our stress chemicals, our stress hormones over our sex hormones. So that's when we some people will see signs of hormone imbalances. We will start to see dysregulation of blood sugar, because when our cortisol starts to increase blood sugar, then our insulin is also going to follow. So that just causes this roller coaster of blood sugar issues. And then we start to see like issues with sleep and recovery and adrenal burnout and all of those things. Because like I said, we're kind of in this deficit now of the parasympathetic what's needed, those cofactors. And that's really how we create this situation of dis-ease and dysfunction in the body. It's just not having what we need to go back into that parasympathetic state.
I see this so much with women, but also coaches in the industry, the early mornings, the late nights, the skipping the meals, but then you're eating whatever you can get at the time. And a lot of people are not realizing that fluctuation, that up and down, is affecting our bodies so much. What are some things that you've seen that have been helpful to regulate more of that blood sugar, but also the cortisol levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I work with a lot of trainers too, and I personally am a trainer. I stay up to with my certifications. That's how I started in this health and fitness journey. And I see a lot of us. So we're naturally higher cortisol in the morning when we wake up, because that's what helps our bodies wake up. It's how it should be. And it peaks around noon. And if you skip a meal at that time, which it's going to be way easier to, because your stress hormones are already high. You're kind of running on adrenaline, and then you grab a coffee and then you skip, a meal, and you're like, yes. But eventually that high cortisol, like I said, will eventually take a hit to some of your sex hormones, or it's going to cause issues with sleep and even blood sugar. Because here's the thing, if you're starting out on that roller coaster in the morning, your blood sugar can't regulate the rest of the day. And then we become more insulin resistant the second part of the day. And that's when we're eating our largest meal. And we're thinking like, oh, sleep and hormones and everything else is going to not be impacted by this late meal. But I see it's so easy. And I think a lot of it is society. We're not taught to sit down and take care of ourselves and feed ourselves properly, especially that first half of the day, because that's when we really need to be supporting cortisol levels by having enough food. And we do the exact opposite with our society. And so it really is like taking the time and the preparation and the intention to make sure you're feeding your body properly. And if you skipped meals, your hormones, I would actually prefer it be in the evening, which is like the least likely that we're going to do, because by then we're starving. We've starved ourselves all day. And so blood sugar is so low at that point that we're just scrambling at that point. It's more of a primal refeeding type situation.
This makes so much sense why a lot of women have food issues towards the end of the day, especially around binge eating or some form of eating disorder, is due to the fact that they're starving at the start of the day. The hormones are all over whack. And of course, you're going to want to ramble and eat more at the night, in the evening. You also made a really interesting remark about how we should be doing the complete opposite. Yeah. I would love to know a little bit more about that, because we know right now society's like, get up early, get shit done, get the coffee, skip the breakfast, get straight into work, stress. And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, well, I'm tired. I just want to like eat whatever it is. What should we be doing differently?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I love how you talked about the food, like the mindset, like where people are like, oh, it's willpower. And it's not willpower at that point. Like I said, when your blood sugar is really low because your cortisol has been so high during the day, then it does become this like biochemical need for quick sugar. That's why you have those tremendous cravings the second half of the day. So the easiest way to think about this is cortisol, like we mentioned, is higher in the morning, peaks at noon. The only macronutrient that can help bring cortisol levels in check are carbohydrates. And a lot of us, that's when we're training the most. Like when our cortisol is highest, that's when our performance should be the highest as well. But that means that our nutrient need is there as well, right? We want to be fueling those workouts and fueling that performance. But in a stable way, not saying just go crazy on the sugar and carbs, right? We want to make sure that we're having stable blood sugar responses to start our day. And then from that point, that peak of cortisol from noon on, that's when we can start tapering off of carbohydrates for most people, because as melatonin starts to increase, our insulin resistance also increases. So we want to make sure that we're tapering off of carbs at that point in the day, because we can't process them as well. And it's really interesting. Women need to know that a meal, the same meal will impact you differently, not just different parts of the day, but also different parts of our cycle. And so we're not taught this and we're not told this, but a lot of it is just because we're so out of rhythm with not just our sleep wake or our circadian rhythms, but also our hormonal rhythms as well. And we're just never taught those things. So it truly is about learning from like ground zero, what our cycle actually does, what hormones need to be supported when. There's times where you should be training super hard. There's times where you just need to be chilling out and eating more carbs and taking it easy. And we're not taught that. We're given these meal plans that are the same thing all day, every day. And that really disconnects us even more from those natural rhythms.
You're literally giving me PTSD when I first started my health and fitness, when I had a coach give me a meal plan. And it was like green juice and it was like steamed chicken with like carrots and there was like barely anything. But I remember at the end of the day, it was like a large amount of food, which again, it makes so much sense now while we're talking about this. It's so backwards and we should be looking at it differently. I also want to continue this conversation around food because I know a lot of our listeners either have been taught not to have carbs in the evening, or now that we're talking about having smaller amounts compared to what they're having right now. What is that happy medium way of having a meal before bedtime? Because I know for myself and what I teach my clients is having your last meal at least 2-3 hours before bedtime. But we know a lot of people will have their last meal probably half an hour to an hour before.
Yeah, it's really hard. But honestly, it is one of those things that keeps people so stuck, like whether they're trying to heal or trying to fix their sleep or their hormones or anything like that. If it seems too simple, but literally just shifting when we are timing our meals makes a humongous difference. Because the thing is, if you're having a meal right before bedtime, for one, your body is spending all of that energy digesting that food and trying to regulate blood sugar after that meal, which we already said, it already like kind of sucks a little bit because you're already more insulin resistant then. So it's going to need a lot more power to go into that. And then on top of that, what is your body not doing when it's digesting that food, right? It's not detoxing. It's not repairing. Insulin's high. It needs to be low then. So we're going to bed essentially inflamed, and we're waking up inflamed because we didn't have that energy go where it needed to go overnight. So, and then we're kind of set up in this cycle where we are erratic just from the beginning of the day. Like our blood sugar was up and down all night. And then we start our day and it's already starting. And then we grab coffee, it makes it worse. You know what I mean? It's just this cycle that continues. And so ideally, when I'm having people start to correct this rhythm, I like 4 hours before bed for the last meal to be done, if possible. And if not, you try to do something that's easily digestible, right? Something that's not going to, it should be the smallest meal of your day. And it really is, usually the opposite of that. So I'm like, take the little light thing you do for lunch and do that for your dinner. Because most people just like have a little snack for lunch. And I'm like, flip that, and it makes a humongous difference.
Again, that simple change makes such a big difference, not only for your sleeping habits, but for your digestion and again, for your hormones as well. Yes. And you mentioned a really good point earlier is a disruptive system towards our food is disrupting a cycle, especially as women.
Yes, absolutely. Because think about it this way. So a lot of us are progesterone is just knocked out. That's going to be the first one that's like knocked out. Progesterone's like our calming, feel good hormone. It helps us balance out our estrogen. And a lot of women, when they're overtraining, underfeeding, all those things, the first thing they're going to do is lose their cycle because their progesterone is what gets impacted. And, the thing that impacts progesterone the most is cortisol. Cortisol and insulin are not separate from each other. They're counter-regulatory. So we have to think about, insulin's going to impact your estrogen and your testosterone. Cortisol is affecting progesterone. And so these all interplay together. And the best way to find balance with all of them is to get blood sugar regulated. So cortisol isn't like this. So insulin isn't like this. And we're just stable. Then our body can divert that energy into formation of hormones versus stress hormones.
I love the fact that we've been able to correlate why progesterone has been so low due to the stress regarding to lifestyle, but also training, dieting. It's a big theme around the health and fitness industry where a lot of women are wanting to become the smallest version of themselves and not realizing the impact that it has on our hormones. Aside from progesterone, do we see any imbalances with estrogen as well?
I do. I do see when someone's had chronically, it could go either way. If their cortisol has been chronically high, right, and they're kind of like bottomed out in that burnout state, I often see estrogen and progesterone really, really low, like sometimes in the postmenopausal range, and they're still cycling women, which is crazy. And then you can even see on the flip side, if insulin resistance is the biggest issue, then we're going to have increased aromatization, which means that we have more testosterone converting to estrogen. And so we have more, it's kind of like this feedback loop that the more fat cells we have, the more estrogen we can hold on to. And it just becomes this like whole situation, right? The more insulin we have, the more estrogen we have. And so it's just like storage. And it's really hard to fix unless you're fixing the insulin and the cortisol.
So this is a great way. Again, I want to continue this conversation around cortisol, but for some listeners who don't know this relationship between cortisol and blood sugar, you've literally just highlighted it so well, making them realize, hey, like right now with your imbalance of blood sugar levels is affecting your hormones. And as you mentioned, if it's more body fat, there'll be an increase in estrogen, overtraining, decrease in progesterone. So I hope there's a little bit of like light bulb moments for our listeners going, okay, what changes do I need to make right now? I would also love you to explain the connection between cortisol and insulin and how else or how more it impacts our well-being.
Yeah, for sure. So when we're thinking about hormonal rhythm and how cortisol and insulin affects that, it's kind of important to think about it in a way that we want to make sure that our body has those reserves for hormone production versus the stress hormone production. So the more chronically stressed we are, like if we're not balancing blood sugar, if we are not balancing blood sugar on our own, our cortisol is going to do it for us. And so that's the important piece, is like we need to take control of that before cortisol go ahead and like, I got this. I'm just going to raise blood sugar on my own, whether you're eating or not. And that's really truly what happens. And anytime cortisol is high, we're going to get blood sugar that's high. And cortisol also counteracts the effect of insulin. And we need insulin to get our glucose into our cells and our nutrients and our proteins and all of those things into our cells. If that doesn't happen, if we have too much glucose, too much insulin, too many toxins, right? All of these factors that can create this kind of blockage of these insulin receptors, then we become at first hyper, too much insulin. So we're insulin dominant. And then after a while, we become really resistant to it. So sometimes this doesn't show up in our blood work until it's pretty far gone, because our body is still compensating with the blood sugar, the cortisol, the insulin for a really long time. So people are like, well, I'm in the normal range, but they're showing me all these signs of insulin resistance, the hormone imbalances, the sleep issues, the hair loss, all of these things. It all boils down to finding that balance between cortisol and insulin. And it truly can be, not always, but can be as simple as when you're timing those meals. Because if you take that blood sugar balance into control on your own, starting with your morning routine, then you don't have to worry and be at the mercy of what cortisol and insulin are doing. You can actually you can do that yourself. So that's kind of like the takeaway, is like you have the power to fix that. And even if you are far gone, like I was for a long time, I had created a situation of insulin resistance. And a lot of it was, and especially in the fitness world, and I don't know if this is the common mentality right now still, but when I was training, it was you eat every 2 or 3 hours. So you're eating protein throughout the whole day. And that can create a state of insulin resistance too, because we're constantly fed. We never get a break from insulin. So it is important to know that while I understand the impact that could have on muscle synthesis and building, it also, for the person who's sensitive to insulin, could create that perfect storm where they don't have a big enough break for insulin to drop off. And they're just constantly flooded, becoming more and more insulin resistant every tiny meal they're eating. So it is a lot, but you have to consider, not to put in like a place of fear, but just to be, if you're not getting the results you want, or if you have those signs of insulin resistance, it could literally just be how many meals you're having and when the timing is.
It makes such a big impact. And I love the fact that you mentioned eating every 2 to 3 hours, because honestly, I still feel as if that message is still ingrained in people's minds. And it's such a good way to look at it right now, going realistically, we probably don't need to do that every day, all day. And like you said, depending on your cycle, depending where you are within that month, your cravings or your food desire is going to be completely different.
Absolutely. And your needs, they change over like how you're training, and you know, just like you just have to cycle things in and out, you know, and even protein, you know, some days you're going to be higher in protein, you're training heavier, you're going to need more of it in that moment. But do you need the same amount on a day where you're not doing any activity? Probably not.
Yeah. Again, it's so interesting because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are tuning in going, but like, I need to be consistent and I need to hit my protein targets and I need to do this, I need to do that. But like, as you said, Stacy, like every day is going to be slightly different, and we just need to be okay with those changes, especially when we're wanting to have more of that balance between both nervous systems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, like, one of the biggest factors I see that creates that imbalance is truly just the blood sugar component of things. And it creates everything from anxiety to depression to the hormone issues, and they all intertwine. And it really can be something that people can take into their own hands and fix. So it's, you know, it's just one of those things that we're not taught.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're teaching everyone right now how to take those steps.
I love it.
So again, as you mentioned, like we all have control in what we're doing. And again, for our listeners, they have control right now how to change it. And as Stacy mentioned, it's just a simple change. It's having a bigger breakfast, a smaller dinner. Like something so simple can make such a big impact. And regarding the blood sugar, you also mentioned how sleep is interrupted with that. And I can relate to this because for so long, I was an awful sleeper. I would constantly wake up, go to the toilet, thinking it was the norm. And then I did a lot of research. I even read Matthew Walker's book, Why Do We Sleep? And I've realized it's actually not normal. It's my lifestyle that was affecting my sleep. And as you mentioned, because of the lack of sleep, there's the high in cortisol, the high in blood sugar levels because of their instability of food. And I would love to, because you're very big on sleep and regulating your circadian rhythm. I see you all the time. It's like as if we're together.
We know each other. Yeah.
I know, but on Instagram, you know, you're very big at proving and providing information how natural light is good, and at the end of the day is like lowering that light. What are some things that are useful for, you know, regulating that nervous system?
Yeah, definitely. So the nervous system, a lot of the reasons why we become so dysregulated, not just is like society, right? It's just this rushing, always doing mentality. And sometimes it truly is saying like, I don't want to do this anymore, you know, or like, why am I doing this? Like, not people pleasing, not, you know, prioritizing where you divert your energy, because a lot of times we get to this place of dysfunction, whether it's our nervous system or health or whatever it may be, because we're diverting too much energy to things that don't fuel us, right? They're not giving us energy, where they're just drains. And so sometimes it is we're overcommitting. Sometimes it is because we are in our homes all day long and we're not connecting with the sun. We're not getting the conversion of serotonin to melatonin because we are wearing sunglasses all day long, you know? So it truly is about connecting with the sun a few times a day. I always say sunrise and sunset. That's when you're going to get that red light therapy. And you're going to help regulate that sleep wake cycle, which is going to help with your cortisol rhythm. So that's a really great way. Grounding, getting your feet on the earth, getting all of the negative ions from the earth and helping your body actually discharge all of this, like we have a positive net charge and the earth has a negative one. And so we are meant to balance each other out. And so when we go barefoot on the earth, we are discharging all of this pent up energy and acidity into the earth, and we're receiving negative ions or energy from it. So, you know, to me, it's a no brainer. Like, just go outside, put your feet on the sun, see the sun, or put your feet on the earth, see the sunrise. That in itself can help you connect with some of those circadian rhythms. And then the other thing with the nervous system is that our body doesn't feel safe. Our body and our mind does not feel safe. It's looking for safety in some way. So what need is not being met, right? Is it a relationship? Is it our community? Like, is it that we are not fueling our actual like passion and our purpose? There's always some need that is unmet, and it could be movement. It could be the food that we eat. So it really truly is about being introspective and realizing, okay, what is not being met right now? We're doing all the things to regulate hormones and blood sugar and all that stuff. What is still off? And it's usually one of our basic needs. So it truly is about being insightful and taking a deep dive, right, into what might be missing in our lives. And usually in the combination of all of those things, our connection with nature, our connection to self, that's usually brings a lot of calm to the nervous system. On top of that, you definitely need to think about the light you're exposed to, especially like as soon as the sun sets, although I'm doing the opposite right now. I'll fix it, don't worry. But usually doing like incandescent lights versus LED or blue lights, blue light filters, things like that. They're all going to do LED light and blue light depletes our melatonin, which is going to impact what happens with cortisol and blood sugar and all those things overnight. So making sure that we're being mindful of the light that we expose our eyes to is going to be really, really important. So getting unfiltered sun and then being mindful about our devices and all of these things we're intaking at night, those will set you up for success in that nervous system regulation.
It's so simple, yet so many people have these objections of making these changes. And it literally, it literally baffles me. And again, maybe it's because I've been doing it for so long now. And I actually can't remember the time where I spent so long watching TV till like 1, 2 a.m. thinking it was norm. You also mentioned a really good point around the sunlight and having it without sunglasses. And this is a debate I constantly have with people going, protect your eyes, you know, the sunlight, you're going to squint, it's going to cause issues. I would love to know your take about this, because you mentioned having sunlight without sunglasses.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the times we have tremendous sensitivity to light. For one, insulin can create a situation, right, where we have macular degeneration, where we are really light sensitive. Pathogens can also make us really light sensitive. Just kind of having a toxin load that is too full. There are certain things that make us light sensitive. So you kind of have to ease into it if that's something that's new to you. But the reason why we burn is because not just like the seed oil component of things and the toxins that are oxidizing on our skin, but the fact that our melanin cannot be converted because we have sunglasses on. And truly, our eyes are photoreceptors. They do make our bodies produce melanin, which is what makes us tan. And so versus burning. And so if that natural process can't happen, if we're laying out, we have sunglasses on, our body's not going to have that natural instinct to be like, hey, maybe it's time, maybe you're done. You know what I mean? We're going to push through and we're going to get burnt. And then all of those fears that everybody associates with the sun are going to be like, oh, we knew it. Like the sun damage and all of these things, when our body has natural innate like mechanisms to control that. So it's just, we're so far gone with the foods we're consuming that are causing inflammation, making us more likely to burn. Those like sunglasses, which are affecting our hormones, all of these things create this perfect storm to make us all fearful of the sun. And I use this scenario that back in the day, like when we had this rickets epidemic, right? When kids were having this vitamin D deficiency and it was just everywhere. What they did was they created solariums for these kids to lay in the sun and heal. And that's what we did to heal these kids from rickets. And nobody's talking about that, right? Like, this is like, that was what you did. And now it's like, oh, well, just give them some vitamin D and some calcium. They'll be fine. You know, it's this, nature truly does heal. We've just gotten so far gone from it. We don't know how to tap into it.
Yeah, wow. That is so interesting. And I love the fact that we've been able to dive into that. And hopefully, again, it'll encourage a few people to take those sunglasses off here and there and get more of that sun exposure, especially with grounding. I think grounding is such a underrated value towards our health. You know what? If I could walk barefoot everywhere, I would.
Yeah. And when we were kids, we wanted to, right? And then we were like, no, you have to have shoes on. And then we just like, kids hate putting shoes on, and because it's innate within us. We know that we're supposed to connect with the earth. And where I live in Florida, it's pretty like, if you're by the beach, it's okay. If you don't have shoes on, like, no big deal.
Yeah, I love it. Again, like, I take every opportunity to go barefoot, and some people are just like, what are you doing? And I'm like, let's connect with the ground. As you mentioned, there's that positive and negative connection. So it's just like, well, why not utilize it if it's literally right here and it's free? Like, it's so helpful.
Oh my gosh, so helpful. Yes. Yeah.
And it's a great way for promoting more healthy nervous system. Again, for someone who's like so stressed out and not sure what to do, like, grounding is one of the first thing to go ahead and do.
It's instant calm, right? You're instantly calming the nervous system, receiving that energy from the earth. And it's just like this beautiful compensatory mechanism that's like, hey, I've got you. You're safe. And that's what the nervous system needs.
100%. Thinking of safety and the nervous system, we know that there's a connection with the mind body and also our digestion. And I would love for us to finish off today, because lately you've been talking quite a bit about the metabolism, and this is going to work really nicely to what we've been talking about with the blood sugar roles and how it's been playing in our daily lives. However, we know, and you would see this as well in the health and fitness industry, that a lot of people are saying that they have a slow metabolism. And I would love you to debunk this a little bit more to make people realize what is the actual main factor between this quote unquote slow metabolism, and how can we address it? Yeah.
So when I think about this, and this is one of those things I used to believe too, like, I've been stuck too. Like, I've been told thyroid, I've been told this, so I've been through the ringer too on my own personal journey. And so I want to like think a little abstractly here too. When we say, oh, our metabolism is broken, our words have power. And our words are creating coherence in our body and mind. Our body responds to the words that we repeat. We keep telling ourselves, we're broken, we're broken, we're broken, we're broken. That's our baseline. Our body doesn't know any different than that. So like, not to say, oh, just start saying things you don't believe in, but understand that the words that you speak, you embody. And so it's important to say, you could rephrase that, right? Like, we can rephrase that to something like, this is different. I'm going to look at this out of a place of curiosity and an opportunity to learn and grow, versus like, I'm broken and I'll never be healed, because that will stop you right there every single time. I see it all the time. So the power of our words definitely matters. As far as actually having a slow metabolism, I always say it's responding appropriately to chronic stress, right? Chronic stress, and I'll take it even a step further, chronic toxicity. What are the amount of fat that we have in our body is related to not just our blood sugar and our insulin, but also our toxin load. Because like we talked about, our body creating more fat to store excess estrogen. It does the same thing for excess toxins. So we are bombarded, especially women. I think on the average, a woman walks out of her door with over 220 chemicals on her body just getting ready for the day. Right. That's on average, right? And these are endocrine disruptors. There's things that mimicking estrogen and testosterone. And when the body has these synthetic forms coming in, it gets really confused. and it's trying to detox all of these things, right? Or creating more fat to store them. So there's a lot of things going on when your metabolism starts to be affected. And I think of it too as it's conserving energy, right? It's conserving energy for your survival response or your immune system or your broken digestion or whatever is missing for you specifically. And I will take it another step further, is that a lot of times we have malabsorption happening because of what's happening in our gut. Maybe toxins are blocking our receptors and we can't really get those nutrients, or insulin, right? We can't get nutrients into the cell. And our body is going to be like constantly fed, but also our cells are undernourished. So it's truly kind of like looking at the individual, being able to decipher, is this because of gut inflammation? Is it nervous system? Is it adrenals? Is it like combination of all? Is it insulin resistance? And really helping that person support that specific area. And the body knows how to heal. And if we can divert energy and help it conserve energy in other areas by helping it out with some of that inflammation, right? We have systemic inflammation driven by insulin or gut imbalances. We can fix that. And then the body can divert that energy once again. I always like to say, like, if you're being chased by a tiger, your body's not going to be like, this is a great time to get in shape. And that's so many of us, 70% of us are stuck there. So we have to fix that to be able to make our body respond appropriately.
It's so true. Obviously, none of us are being chased by tigers.
You're right.
Yeah, but you made a really good point. It's like going back to the start of our conversation earlier, saying when someone wakes up with a high stress because of the lack of sleep, the late night meal, and then they revert to a coffee, they're running late to work, so they miss their lift, or they're stuck in traffic. It's like the elevation of stress is like go, go, go. And then you're stressing about you wanting to diet. So you're eating less, and that increases the cortisol. And then you're like, why am I not losing weight? And it's just like, well, far out. Like, you're so stressed out right now. Your body is not able to function optimally. And I see this constantly, this like yo-yo vicious cycle of I'm wanting to lose weight. I want to do this. It's just like, you are actually not optimally able to lose weight right now because you are so stressed out. And you made such a good point regarding that.
Yeah, it really truly is about slowing down. And I will tell you, I was able to fix my insulin resistance and get in the best shape I've ever been in by actually slowing down training. And you know what I mean? Slowing down commitments. And a lot of times we think more and more and more, like push harder. We need to add in an extra workout. That's what we need, right? And then we're messing with cortisol again and pulling from these reserves we don't have. But sometimes it truly is just a call to slow down and start saying no, start resting more, prioritizing yourself. And a lot of times it is that conservation of energy, right? Like, where are you putting your energy? Are you putting it into things that are draining you even more? Or are you doing things that literally are giving you energy, like the sun and nature and all of those things? So it truly is about finding out whatever that is for you that's missing and pouring more into that.
And like you said, it's either around the metabolism side of things, or it's the nervous system, like whether you're like stress, or whether it's the training side of things. It's looking at that and also being open for change, because I do believe a lot of people who wanting to make a change are scared of actually making that step due to them knowing life is not going to be the same, which it impacts like another layer of stress in their mind.
Yes. And I'm sure you see me talk about this too, is we crave the familiar, no matter how dysfunctional it is. And we talk about stress hormones, the more we're flooded with stress hormones, the more receptors we have for those stress hormones, which creates a chemical addiction to them. So when people are like, I really can't stop stressing myself out, I think I might be addicted to it. They actually are. And so they get home and they're watching really stressful TV and listening to really stressful podcasts. And you know what I mean? Because they are really trying to get that chemical hit because we have more receptors for those. And so it is a lot of unlearning a lot of intentional living to what you expose your mind and body to. And you have to reset those neural pathways, right? By repetition of beneficial habits and thoughts and all of those things. So it can be a lot, and it can be scary because it's unknown. But that's another primal instinct that your body's like, I know this is how change is created, but I'm terrified of change because I'm in survival. And so let's just go back to normal.
Gosh, this literally takes me back to wanting to always watch horror movies, watch the news, and we know that type of environment is so stressful, or being in a toxic relationship, constantly fighting. Of course, your nervous system is going to feel so regulated. And then I remember the first moment I actually started making a change. It was 1 minute meditation just to like sit in stillness. And my mind was like, 1 minute, that is way too long. I can't do that. And now I do 20 minutes a day, twice a day now. So it just shows you over repetition, it makes such a big impact, and it is doable.
It is so doable. And start like you did, start small. I mean, when your nervous system is so hypervigilant like that, the idea of being alone with your thoughts can be terrifying for a lot of people. And that's why a lot of people avoid it. But that is, like you said, that's where change is made, and the repetition of those habits. And that's how we create new baselines for our nervous system to say, hey, especially in the beginning of the day, this is how my day is going to go. This is my nervous system. This is my threshold, versus waking up to a loud alarm that's 10 minutes late. You've snoozed it too long. You're rushing out the door. It's just like, oh, you're grabbing coffee. You didn't eat breakfast. It just sets you up for this snowball effect of just more stress as throughout the day. But we can become addicted to that. And that's why it can be a hard habit to break.
If it's one takeaway for everyone today, is to actually change the things that you're addicted to. If you're noticing it's impacting you negatively and you're noticing that you're stressed out way too much, it's like, what can I find something that's going to be more beneficial to calming my nervous system, and be addicted to that, because that is a good fucking addiction.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the hard thing to tune into, right? If we're so distracted with all of the different medias and sources, and we're just kind of living by default every day, it's really hard to tune in to know what we really want. So that truly is the hard work, right? Is quieting everything so that you can really say, your body, the thing is, you have wisdom. You have internal and innate wisdom on what you need. It's just so many of us are so distracted by all of the conflicting information out there. We have these people that we trust, but one person says this and one person says that. And I always tell people, like, take the information, take as much as you can, but still maintain your peace. And also, you still have to plug that into your life, right? Like, you have to be able to tune into what you need, because what one person's saying is not necessarily your journey and your path and your way,
Definitely. Again, it's like referring as coaches, too often they will give their programs or meal plans to clients, and the client will be like, yes, this is awesome, I want to do this, but not realizing, is it actually fitting my schedule and my routine, instead of the opposite way.
Yes.
And this is something that I work really closely with my clients, is understanding their lifestyle. Are you a shift worker? Are you a full-time mom? Are you a student? Like, what is your lifestyle like? Because there's no point of us giving them certain protocols to follow, when at the end of the day, it makes them even more stressed out trying to fit it into their schedule.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. And the best protocol and the best plan is one that you will actually stick to, and it has to fit in your life. And I come across this all the time, because, as you know, just working with that human, like I said, we're dealing with a lot of people who are stuck in survival and have a really hard time knowing what they need. They want the answers, but then their body and mind are resisting them, right? So you have to kind of shift it to like seem like it's their idea, right? And that's the art of coaching, where you're like, what do you think you need? And helping them. And maybe oh, this is totally blood sugar, but they have some other thing in their mind that they think, okay, well, this is what I need to work on. This is what's in front of my face. So how can we help them support that? And also on the back end, throw in what we know really needs support for them, right? But it has to be their body mind connection to really work for them.
Definitely. It's such an art, the way of coaching. And as you mentioned, it's putting it back on the client, asking them, is this going to be beneficial or not, instead of us pushing our own biased opinions on them.
Which is so easy to do because and it comes out of a good place, because all we want is for people to feel like how we feel, right? And like, we can see their playing cards, we can see how it's going to play out. And we want that so badly for them, but we can't rob them of their path there. And so sometimes they have to experience some of the ups and downs to not only get to that place, but to appreciate it and know how to stay there. And that takes growth. You don't just get there overnight, because when you do, you don't embody that new person and that new being. So it truly is about helping them embody this person that they're trying to become.
100%. What is one thing that's helping you embody a healthier version of yourself right now?
I think it's really just it's just being fluid. Like for me, I'm at a point where I'm like, I just want to surrender a little bit. I've been so regimented and so protocol oriented for so long that I'm like, I still have a morning routine, but you know what? It may not be the same one every day, because when you do that, it loses its power, right? You forget why you started it. So for me, it's like showing up for myself every single day in whatever way that feels right in that moment. And throughout our cycle that changes, right? So I'm just trying to be very like fluid. And I am a parent, and you kind of have to do that too, right? Because when you're a parent, you're being very rigid and just like, no, this is how things are happening, will actually make things way worse, right? And that's just in general in life. Like the more rigid we are, the more we feel like we have to control. So I'm just kind of in a place where it's like, I'm going to show up for myself every single day so that I can be the best doctor, wife, mom, sister, whatever role I'm playing that day, and just kind of allowing. And that's kind of where I'm at.
I love that. And you know what? Allowing and surrendering, guess what? It helps to heal the nervous system. You feel calm, you feel at peace.
Yes.
So it's just like, oh, it's no coincidence why we're wanting this, because we're sick of the old way of living.
Yeah. And I spent way too long in fight or flight. And I think that to me is a sign that my nervous system is finally in a place where I can even think about that. Because if I allowed before, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to stop breathing if I stop thinking about it. Like that's how like stuck I was. So you have to kind of go with these ebbs and flows of life. And there's sometimes where you're going to be a little ramped up, and you just got to bring yourself back, and just learning that rhythm. That's what our bodies are designed to do.
Well, girls, if that's one thing to take away from today, is just go with the ebbs and flow of life, and really figuring out what that root cause is of your stress, whether it is your nervous system, whether it is your digestion, your sleep habits, your environment, like anything, and just start honing on that and getting some answers to obviously live a more calm and peaceful life.
Absolutely. So much more fun on the other side.
Definitely. Well, girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you tag us, screenshot us, and give us some feedback, because obviously we love hearing from all of you. And Stacy, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me.